Hello YouTube, this is Chuck and I'm back, and what you're looking at is the collapsed entrance to a mine. There used to be a mine tunnel here, and the collapsed over time. I'm not sure whether somebody did that deliberately or whether Mother Nature took care of that. But that was called the Golden Waif Mine. Waif is spelled W-A-I-F. And figured like this would be a good spot to tell you a story about another mine issue, a mine call that we had. This is a firefighter story, and let me spin you around and give you a quick pan. There's my chair. I'm going to go sit in that for a minute while I tell you the story. And there's the van over there, and this is actually over here is actually the back nine of the golf course. We're on the west side of town. We're still in the city limits. Let me finish spinning you around here. And let's go over to my chair here and sit down, and I'll tell you my story. I have a lot easier sometimes to try to tell a story when you're sitting down than it is when you're trying to walk and not trip over stuff. Anyway, as I said, this is going to be a firefighter story, and this is something that happened, probably 1979, maybe 78, 79, something like that. And it involves an old mine, which is why I'm here. The Golden Waif, by the way, was there was a number of mines right here in town, and the Golden Waif was one of them, and run by a local. And like all the mines here, it really didn't do as well as you'd think it would. Anyway, let me get back to my story. We were down at the station one day, and a couple guys came in from the Arizona State Mine Inspector's office. And they had a complaint, and they were looking for a particular mine location. They didn't know for sure where it was at. So they stopped in to ask us. Well, I've had a number of Jeeps over the years. I had 9 Jeeps over the years, and I know the country here pretty well. Even back then I did. And so they wanted to know where there was a mine called the White Hill Mine. And by golly, I knew where it was. So I asked them what the call was, and they said they had a report of unsecured explosives at that mine site. Well, the old guy that ran that mine, his name escapes me right now. I've been trying to think of it, but I can't remember it now. It's 10 minutes after I upload this, I'll remember it, and if I do, I'll put it in the link in the comments. But anyway, he was an old hard rock miner here, and he was still alive when I moved here. But a few years later, he'd passed away, and I knew about his mine, and he had a little cabin out there, and he'd go out there and stay for 3-4 days at a time, and then he'd come back into town and he'd stay at his daughter's house. And it's a 4-wheel drive road to get out there, but he had about a 54 or 55 Ford pickup. Of course, they were 2-wheel drive in those days, and an old yellow one, old beat-up yellow pickup, and he had about 1,000 pounds of rocks in the back of it to give it traction, and he'd drive that truck out back and forth out to that old mine. I don't know how in the world he made it sometimes, but he did. And when the road got too bad, he'd stop and spend time trying to rebuild the road good enough to get his truck in there. You might hear some traffic in the background. This is pretty popular with the ATV people, and this still, I think I said it already, but it's still Monday, September 4th, Labor Day, so there'll be some traffic on the road. So anyway, so I was trying to tell these guys how to get to this mine, and I asked them what they were driving, and they were driving a 2-wheel drive Chevy pickup. And so I told them, well, you're not going to get in there with that most likely. So I said, why don't we take you there? There was a couple of us with 4-wheel drives, and my 4-wheel drive at the time was a 1976 Toyota FJ40 Land Cruiser. And I drove that for a few years and took it on a lot of back roads around here. And just so happened at the time when they came in, there was one of my volunteers was there, a guy named Rick, and Rick also had an FJ40 Land Cruiser, and so he and I kind of went 4-wheeling together when we both could do it. And so he was there, and he wasn't doing anything. So I told him, I said, well, we'll take 2 vehicles in case one of us breaks down or something, but let me run home and get mine. So I run up to my house. I lived less than a mile from the fire station. And went up and I got my Land Cruiser, and I came back down, and the lead guy, a guy named Dave from the mine inspector's office, and he probably weighed, I don't know, 350 pounds on a good day. He was a pretty chubby guy, and he managed to get into the Land Cruiser. And the other guy, and I can't remember his name now, but he rode with Rick in the other Land Cruiser, and we went out to this old mine, and it's about I don't know, 6 or 7 miles northwest of town, and it's four-wheel drive road. It takes probably an hour to get there. So we took them out to this mine, and so when we got there, it was still open. It's been closed up for years now. I don't know whether Mother Nature closed it or whether the Forest Service closed it, because they closed a bunch of them because they were worried about people going in there and getting hurt. But it was still open at the time, and it hadn't been too long since the old miner died. And so anyway, we went out there, and so the decision was made that Rick and this other guy would stay outside, and that Dave and I would go inside and check out this report of unsecured explosives. And so we went in this thing. We got in there about probably 100 feet, and it opened up in a little room with a little kind of like a little T intersection with passages going every which direction. And sure enough, here's boxes of dynamite. Well, that Dave, he'd been a hard rock miner for years before he became a mine inspector, and he was pretty savvy. And he started looking at this stuff, and boy, he got all excited. And he said that it looked like a dynamite museum in there. And he said all this different kinds of dynamite. Now, I was relatively familiar with blasting, and but obviously not to the extent he was. But there was all kinds of different sizes and shapes and potencies and brand names and all this kind of stuff of dynamite. Some of regular standard sticks that we all think about when we think dynamite sticks, and there was the big ones, the ones that are like 3 inches in diameter and about a foot long, and there was all kinds of stuff in there. And he had all kinds of blasting caps and everything just laying there, and not secured in any way. Anybody walk in that mine tunnel could find that. And so decision was made that it couldn't be left that way. It had to be destroyed or secured. So in the process of going through all that stuff, Dave reached in this one open box of dynamite and grabbed about 3 or 4 sticks with one hand. And as he picked them up, there was all kinds of white crystal growth on the bottom of them. And in just as calm a voice as you could possibly imagine, he turned it over and he showed that to me. And he says, those are nitroglycerin crystals. This is extremely unstable. So if you ever see dynamite like this, don't touch it while he's standing there holding it in his hand. So he very, very gingerly put all that back down there. And then he and I took that dynamite very gingerly, all of it a box at a time, and we carried it outside to a little open area in front of the entrance to that mine. Now, the way you normally dispose of dynamite is you burn it, because it burns very vigorously, and it can be shock sensitive and it can explode, but it usually doesn't. It usually just burns very vigorously and burns to absolutely nothing in a pretty short period of time. So we made, I don't know how many trips back and forth into that mine tunnel, carrying that very, very sketchy boxes of explosives out there and setting them out in that open area. And when we got all done with that, we actually, I had a gas can, and we took a little bit of gasoline and we poured there next to it, and then basically poured a little trail away from it and lit it and ran like hell. And there was a little hump of dirt a ways back, and so all 4 of us went over there and hid behind that pile of dirt and parked the vehicles back quite a ways, and we watched that stuff burn. And it didn't detonate, but boy, it burned bright and it burned fast and it burned hot, and it wasn't 15 minutes and it was gone. Nothing but a few ashes there from the boxes. But we disposed of that old dynamite. But I'll never forget Dave picking up that handful of sticks of dynamite, and turning it over and looking at those crystals. And I mean, they were like grown like an inch thick on there. And just as matter of fact as could be, he told me, he says, if you ever see crystals like this on dynamite, don't ever pick it up. And anyway, that's we took care of it. We got out of there. It took us all afternoon. That's just another example I like to tell in my firefighter stories, that when you come to work every day, you had no idea what you were going to end up doing. And we went on a number of those old dynamite calls over the years. And this was just one of the more interesting ones. And hauling the guys to the mine inspector's office out there so we could dispose of that old dynamite. But I'm sure Dave remembered that one as well too, because when he saw all that dynamite, and he said that was like a dynamite museum in there, all the different kinds. And we theorized that probably the old guy that ran that mine, probably all his old buddies were dying off, and when they got to the point where they weren't using it their mine anymore, they must have given it to him, and that must have been where he was storing it all. Either that or he was going around to all the old mines and taking it. I don't really know, one way or another. But, he died back in the late 70s, and so, took all his knowledge and everything with him. And so anyway, that's my dynamite story for today. I'll tell you another little quick one here about the Golden Waif mine. The vein that they were chasing in here. Now, if you don't know about basic mining terminology, when you have a tunnel that goes horizontally into the mountain, that's what that's called. It's called a tunnel. When it goes down from the top, vertical, it's called a shaft. But a lot of times when you get in there and you find the vein that you're looking for, they don't always run straight up and down or side to side. They go off at angles. And so when you go chasing one at some silly angle somewhere, that's called a stope, S-T-O-P-E. And there's a lot of these old mines, they go back in there, and when they hit the vein they were looking for, they'd stope off in some crazy direction, sometimes down, sometimes up. But they'd chase that vein to try to find what they were looking for. This particular mine here, the Golden Waif, there was another tunnel entrance. The vein that they were looking for here was kind of straight up and down. And up on the ridge behind us here to the south, that mine, when I first showed it to you, we were looking pretty much due south. But that mine, there was another tunnel entrance up higher on the mountain. And I actually went in that one, and I was out here all by myself one day just kind of looking at old mines, and that's a whole nother, I'll have to make a video about that, because I was kind of a nut job about doing that. I took a lot of chances, and fortunately I lived through it all. The good Lord was looking out for me, and I never got, fell down a shaft or got hit in the head with a rock or had one cave in or anything like that on me, but I sure had plenty of chances of doing that. I did a lot of exploration. But maybe I'll make a video about that part someday. But anyway, I walked into that mine tunnel, and it didn't look like the tailing pile wasn't very big, so I didn't think it went in there very far. And so I walked back in there, and it was a bright sunny day, and of course my eyes weren't accustomed to the dark. And I got in there maybe, I don't know, 50 feet maybe, and all of a sudden a cotton-picking rattlesnake started rattling. Scared me to death, and it was between me and the opening. So, what are you going to do? Well, what I did is I kept my wits about me. I didn't get scared. And I just sort of stood in one spot and started trying to talk to him, tell him, hey, I'm not going to hurt you. And, you don't have to be scared. And please don't bite me. And all this kind of stuff like that. And gradually, after I stood in there for about 10 minutes or so, gradually my eyes started becoming accustomed to the darkness. And finally I saw him over to the side. And he was all coiled up. And the minute I moved, he started rattling again, but it was wide enough I was able to skirt around him and get back out the door. But it's really a dangerous thing to go into those tunnels like that when you don't have good lighting, because they could actually be a shaft go down right inside there a little ways, and you can actually go in there before your eyes become accustomed to the darkness, and you can just literally fall down off in a hole somewhere and get seriously injured or even killed. That's happened in some of the old mines around here. I got another old mine story I'll have to tell you about. I'll do that in a different video. This is getting kind of long. But anyway, I talked to that rattlesnake. He didn't bite me, and I got back outside again and kept telling myself I shouldn't do stuff like that, but I did it for a long time, and I was pretty young and pretty wild and pretty crazy, and I guess I still am at my age. So anyway, I'm going to turn you around. I'm going to tell you it's a beautiful day. That's part of you can see through the trees over there. That's one of the holes, on the golf course. I'm not sure which one it is, but that's the That's the back nine on the golf course over here. This road we're sitting by goes, about 10 miles west of town and goes clear out to the Madiselle Wilderness area. And there's a ruin out there I want to take you to one of these days. But right now, we'll take a look at those pretty clouds. It's a gorgeous day. Temperatures in the low 80s. And as I always tell you, take care of each other, love each other, take care of yourself. I hope you all have a happy and safe Labor Day weekend. And those of you that have to go back to work tomorrow, I feel sorry for you. I did it for an awful lot of years to earn the right to do what I do now. And I thank the Lord every day that I can. So right now, I'll just tell you, till I make another one, I'll just tell you peace out.